Okay friends, one of the first things we have to do to get started on our job is to safely raise and support the truck so the front wheels are off the ground. After that, we're going to remove all 5 of our lug nuts and then remove the wheel. Now let's move along to removing the tie rod from the knuckle. Okay, now we're going to separate the tie rod from the knuckle. Carefully bonk on the knuckle, but be careful not to damage the tie rod. Now the next thing we want to do is remove our lower ball joint nut. There should be a cotter pin that goes through it. Just go ahead and remove that, and then remove the nut. Next, we're going to remove these 2 mounting bolts. These are the bolts that are going to hold this bracket to the knuckle. Now we're just going to lift this up and set it aside. Let's just go ahead and hold this aside with a ratchet strap. Okay, now that we have this swung out of the way, the next thing that I want to do is start loosening this bolt right here. Now this bolt is going to come through from the front all the way to the back side of that control arm. So I'm going to go ahead and hold on to the nut on this side and then loosen the bolt on this side. Now what you're probably going to notice trying to take out this bolt is that it tends to get stuck right inside here. It's common for it to be stuck in the bushing along this area here, but in our particular case it's not stuck in that bushing, but the reason is because the control arm itself is under a lot of pressure. We need to relieve pressure by loosening up this sway bar link bolt right here. There's going to be a nut located right behind this area. Obviously it's a little bit hard to get to, but if you take a wrench coming from the bottom, typically you can grab right onto that nut. Now the next thing we're going to have to do is move our way to where the control arm meets onto the frame. This is your cam kit right here, and it's the adjustment for your alignment. You're going to of course have to get in alignment by the time we're done, but it's a good idea to just go ahead and mark it so you know approximately where you want it when we put it all back together. Do it on this one, and do the same thing to the other one in the rear. Just leave that loose, do the same. Now we're going to move along to pushing this bolt out of here. Like I said before, typically it's stuck inside the bushing right along here. So I'm just going to take that nut. I'll start it right onto these threads here. That way there we don't necessarily damage the threads. And then we'll use our hammer and give it a couple loving bonks. Okay, ours came out fairly easily, which is nice. Let's just get it the rest of the way out of there. We're just going to go ahead and lower this down. Just be very careful because once you break it free, it's going to swing down, so don't be underneath it. Okay, so now we're going to move along to the top of the strut here. This is where it meets onto the strut tower. There's going to be 4 studs that come up from your strut up through the strut tower and 4 nuts up along the top. You're going to want to go ahead and relieve all 4 of those. For us in particular, somebody put in a leveling kit, so ours is going to be just a little bit different, but just go ahead and remove those nuts. Okay, so I'm moving along to my last one. Obviously, it's going to be coming free now, so we want to make sure it doesn't fall out of here and hit the ground or potentially hurt us. There it is, friends. Now when we go to put this into the truck, pay attention to the top area here. You're going to see a line with something that says out. You want to make sure that's facing out and away from the truck. Okay, now it's time to get our strut in here. Just go ahead and slide it right up. You're going to put the studs up and through the strut tower here. Like I said, ours actually has bolts because of this adapter. So I'll just start all of them in. Now the next thing we want to do is go ahead and jack up the control arm, and we're going to try to line up our sway bar link with its holes over here, and of course the strut with its holes right here. So now I'm just going to reach in from the bottom of the control arm. I'll go ahead and start the nut on there, just a few threads, and then we'll snug it up. Torque this bolt to 89 foot-pounds. Now the next thing we do before we go ahead and start torquing any of this right here, we want to go ahead and have the jack underneath the control arm. We're going to lift this up very carefully, and essentially what we want to do is just have the control arms in the position as if the wheel was on the ground with the weight of the vehicle on it. Okay, now with this jacked up, let's go ahead and snug this. Now let's torque this bolt to 144 foot-pounds. Go ahead and torque them to 33 foot-pounds. Now before we go ahead and remove the jack from underneath the control arm, let's move along to tightening up our control arm bushings right here. You of course want to make sure that you still have the jack underneath there, putting the pressure as if the weight of the vehicle is still on the ground. Make sure that your cams are lined up with the original position they were in. Now we're going to torque these to 207 foot-pounds. Now let's lower this down. Swing this back down and line it up. Now let's put in these lower bolts. Now the next thing we're going to do is torque these two bolts. Torque these to 221 foot-pounds. Let's get the tie rod end back in here. Once you have it snugged up, go ahead and torque it to 51 foot-pounds. The next thing you want to do is line up the slots of the nut with the hole in the tie rod. Once it is, go ahead and put in your cotter pin. Let's go ahead and get our wheel on here. We'll snug up the lug nuts, get the wheel on the ground, and then we'll torque them to manufacturer specifications. Now with the wheel safely on the ground, we're going to continue on by torquing these lug nuts. When you torque them, there's going to be a couple different specifications. If you have the aluminum wheel, like we have here, you're going to torque your lug nuts to 97 foot-pounds. If you have a steel wheel, like you could take a magnet and stick it right to it, you need to torque those to 154. Torqued. Okay friends, we got the front end back together. What's left to do now? Go ahead and take it for a road test down to your local alignment shop.